then when the strike ended, a first draft screenplay was handed.
Hi, my name's Danny Gomez, and welcome to my multi-part presentation on Mobile Suit Gundam, and a short retrospective on what began as a small project on Mobile Suit development, and then soon spiraled into a retrospective on how the history of the Universal Century affected Mobile Suit development, and how the needs of the era had molded the weapons of the era. This is my grand presentation on mobile suit development in the Universal Century. This will span over several parts. From we will cover topics from beginning of the One-Year War all the way to the era of Char's counterattack. We'll cover several properties within the we'll cover several spin-off properties within the Gundam franchise. We won't necessarily go into necessary details, mostly just the mobile suits and some synopses and summaries of the political impacts that each series had on the Universal Century as a whole. This is going to be a long one. Um, just stick with me until the end of every part, and maybe we'll learn something fun, too long, interesting, but it'll be fun. So for this first part, we'll be focusing on the preliminary parts up to the beginning of the One-Year War. Preliminary history, important technologies, and certain aspects of the lore behind the Mobile Suit Gundam that is important to get to know. Later aspects that will further dive in in the future of this series. For the first part, we'll be focusing on for the first slide. This is for the background history. The background history of the Universal Century is a tough one. It's very vague and isn't very described within the lore itself. With most series and background media on the history before the Universal Century's um, implementation as the main calendar, with less more or less being vague. But we know this at the beginning of the one year in the beginning of the Universal Century calendar, before the Universal Century calendar was formally adopted, all nation states on Earth had formulated into a grand world government based on the United Nations charter, called the Earth Federation. The Earth Federation would consolidate all political power within Earth and consolidate into a proper entity called the Earth Federation. The Earth Federation wouldn't become a fully fledged political entity until 001 of the Universal Century, where it would formalize the charter of its political dynasty, well, political entityness, something as sort as the something like a constitution, a charter of the laws and the goals of the Earth Federation, and during this charter would be signed and shown to the public at UC 001. At this time, space colonies were already being formed at Lagrange points. You probably know what Lagrange points are, since you're probably a smart person. But Lagrange points are points in which the gravity well between two or more objects creates this stable area of effect, where objects within that point effect are effectively put into some sort of equilibrium between the gravity wells. Say here, Lagrange point one is both kept into equilibrium by the gravity of the moon and Earth, and so on and so forth. At these Lagrange points, the Earth Federation would construct massive space colonies based on the O'Neill based design O'Neill type space colonies that were proposed back in the 1970s. These space colonies would be the frontier of human development at the beginning of the Universal Century. This would be the beginning of the problems of the Earth Federation. Earth Federation, because of the Earth Federation, would then move people would then move people from Earth into these space colonies due to a various abundance of reasons. During the formation of the Earth Federation, it wasn't mainly just because of all political power just seeming coalesced into one entity. The Earth Federation was formed because of a reason. Economic power and resource shortages due to overpopulation and a lack of resources on Earth has caused strain on national governments, which slowly over time grew desperate and coalesced into the Earth Federation for support and to the United Nations. Right, this this the new Earth Federation needed a solution. Just because they created these new space colonies and they were further developing into space, didn't mean they had solved their issues of their economic burden of supporting an overpopulated population and a lack of resources on Earth. So the Earth Federation made a call, and a very important decision that would reverberate throughout the entirety of the universal century. They would put into plan the space migration plan or the space remigration plan. Either way, what it's called isn't important. It differs between media. But what is important is the effect. The Earth Federation declared that all minorities or unimportant people or people that needed opportunities for work, poor, minorities, anyone that wasn't useful on Earth was to be moved to the colonies and work for the benefit of the Earth Federation. These people would work and live in these space colonies for a better life. This life will not come. These life on the space colonies was hard. They were developing into a new frontier. Life on these colonies were rife with issues. Radiation shielding in the early days had caused several, like thousands of deaths simply because of improper radiation shielding. The early days of space colonization was rough on the space colonists, especially with the economic burden of having to work their salaries. The hard work of every colony had to be sent back to Earth. Over time, these colonies would create their own national identities, these cultures around living in the colonies. They would call themselves space noids, the people that were jettisoned from Earth to live lives in space. Around this time, it's really not specified, but around the same time as these colonies in the Lagrange points were created, lunar colonies were also made on the moon. They're also space noids, but their entire culture is different, and they're like special because like they're on the moon. I don't care. But because of these national identities that arose from these migratory groups of people that needed, they needed a culture. They created a culture in these new frontiers. The government, the Earth Federation, didn't like that. The Earth Federation is okay with space noids creating a culture, but like, as long as it doesn't cut into their profits, as long as it doesn't cut into the resources that get sent back to Earth, it's fine. But soon, economic troubles started on Earth, and well, the taxes and the burdens that were put on the colonies were increased. This started an era of economic strife, which inevitably caused the Earth Federation to accidentally create space imperialism once again. This would start the impetus for Side 3, the furthest colony away from Earth, away from every single celestial body in the Earth sphere, the the space that surrounds the Earth and the Moon, the furthest colony away, Side 3, to revolt. Well, not revolt, but start a movement of independence, started by a single man, Xeon Zoom Daikon, or why new types and Xeon are a thing. Xeon Zoom Daikon, or Daikon, I'll call him. He was a political activist that supported the cause of independence in Side 3. He started this cause of independence grew really strong in the early UC50 Universal. The calendar dates in the Universal Century go by the UC double O blah blah. It's fun, but in the UC double O 50s, Xeon Zoom Daikon started this political rally for the independence of Side 3. He was semi-successful. By the time of UC 0068, the colony had already petitioned for autonomous protectorate status, and it would rename itself from it would rename itself into the Monzo Republic. The the main political philosophy of Daekun's work was based around new types. The new types was his concept that space noids, people that lived in space, are evolving. They're evolving. Um, they're evolving. They're a new evolution of human, and because that they lived in space, they shouldn't need to live on Earth. Humans need to transcend the need to live on Earth, and that they should live in space, and that the space noids should deserve a right to govern themselves, a right for freedom against the already overabundant and space imperialistic Earth Federation, which were taxing the livelihoods of the space noids work hard. He died. He died soon after the Monzo Republic gained autonomous protectorate status. He died from an assassination attempt, as purported, but no one knows who committed the assassination attempt. We all know. All media points towards that the attempt on his death was an assassination, but no canon material interviews has shown who were who were the parties involved to that killed him. In this power vacuum in the Banzel Republic, the Zabi family, a major family that supported Daekun's work into creating a political independence for Side Three, took control of Side Three. They filled in the political power vacuum and solidified the republic into an actual, somewhat nation state. They renamed Side Three, or the Monza Republic, into in honor of Xion's death with the Principality of Xion, to honor his work and his movement of independence. The Zabi family would then go on to prepare the Principality of Xion for an oncoming war of independence, because the Zabi family knew one thing: independence from the Earth Federation is not going to be easy, and the Earth Federation will retaliate from their declaration of independence, shortly after the death of Xion Zum Daiko. The Earth Federation would essentially fight back for their property, which that what they saw. They saw the colonies as not a place or home of the space noins, but property that they owned and that they taxed people that lived there for their hard work and their efforts to feast themselves on the livelihoods of space noins. The Earth Federation didn't see the space colonies or the space noids as living like a place. They saw it as property, and they would soon fight for that property. So the Principality of Xion did one thing: they prepared for war, and they prepared for war by inventing new weapons. These new weapons and new tactics would come about with the invention of the Minovsky fusion reactor. The Minovsky fusion reactor was invented in the early UC, in the early Universal Century. It's never specified when on, but Minovsky reactors were shown to be in use for the usage of space colonies and grand industrial usage by at least the early UC 40s. The fusion reactor is a fusion reactor that's based on the helium 3 helium 3 fusion reaction that are based on the helium 3 fusion reaction. These Minovsky particles are a byproduct of the helium 3 fusion reaction within the universe. In reality, the helium 3 fusion reaction wouldn't create Minovsky particles and would only just create I forgot what it was. I think it was neutrons and electrons as a byproduct. But at this time when Gundam was released, it was the 1970s, and they really didn't know what the helium 3 fusion reaction would make, because helium 3 and fusion were like very unachievable at that time. Anyways, Minovsky particles are a byproduct of helium 3 fusion. Helium they were first discovered by Dr. I forgot his name, Dr. Minovsky. He invented this. But in his testing with the Minovsky fusion reactor, he discovered a byproduct, something that was in the outer linings of the fusion chamber. He found Minovsky particles. Minovsky particles are very special and are very important to the Mobile Suit Gundam universe. When M particles are scattered, I fields or small, tiny lattice structures are created from the repulsive force between the charged M particles, creating a lattice structure of M particles. These these minor I fields, these lattice structures, as we call them, I fields, or something due to the highly charged nature of the particles, causes electronic disruption. Specifically, not electronic disruption, but electromagnetic disruption across a majority of the spectrum. Radio waves, electricity, all that sort of thing. This disruption is very harmful in modern society, but can easily be prevented by extra shielding on electronic machinery to protect it from Minovsky pollution. But a very important aspect of Minovsky particles is that radio waves can't be shielded, or most long range detection methods that are available in the Gundam universe. Radar can't be used because of the electromagnetic signals that it sends out, which would then be disrupted by Minovsky particles. The wave sent back would be disrupted, causing lower resolution, and the wave sent back would be of a lower resolution, causing radar and other targeting systems to be unreliable in a Minovsky polluted environment. Also, another important side effect of Minovsky particles is that high levels of Minovsky pollution stick. Minovsky particles are, I think they are an elementary particle. But because of this, in space and most environments, they stick around. They don't dissipate. The Minovsky particles don't degrade into nothing, but they spread out. And so compact a bunch of Minovsky, release a bunch of Minovsky particles in a dense way in an area, that area would stay Minovsky polluted for decades, probably centuries. This type of thing causes entire areas to be uninhabitable for a modern society or modern electronics or modern technology. Things, it's just becomes uninhabitable for machinery to be used there because of the high Minovsky pollution. And that just sucks. Even with shielding, you need dense shielding to survive in a highly polluted Minovsky area. So there are rules in place to show there are rules and laws in place to show that Minovsky particles can't be heavily used in polluted in a civilian area, as to not deem an entire city to be unusable for you know civilian standards. Minovsky particles, they're fun. But another special property of Minovsky particles is the megaparticle. Megaparticle weaponry, the weaponization of Minovsky particles, aside from their tactical usage. Minovsky particles, when condensed, become megaparticles. Another fusion reaction, which is funny. But Minovsky particles, when condensed, become megaparticles. These things are highly energetic, destructive particles that obliterate matter, so in a sort of way like antimatter comes into contact with matter, but less destructive and more like ablative. A megaparticle annihilates through like a heat fusion sort of thing. It's like a plasma, but not plasma. You get me? Megaparticles, highly energetic, destructive particles. The process to create these megaparticles is a highly energy intensive process. It requires high quantities of Minovsky particles to condense, as well as the energy to induce the fusion itself. This this is a lot of energy. Even with Minovsky fusion reactors creating a lot of Minovsky particles, which are found in the lining of reactors, more Minovsky particles being generated, the larger larger the power of the Minovsky reactor, it still takes a lot of energy. So megaparticle weaponry was only localized to naval battleships, which the Earth Federation, mainly used for their space warships. As you can see, this is Salamis. This is at the top. You can see the Salamis class, and at bottom the Magellan class. These two main ships were the main battleships for the Earth Federation from the UC 0040s, 50s, I think UC 0060s, all the way to the UC 90s. These ships were equipped right. These ships were re-equipped with megaparticle weaponry at the start of UC 0071 for the naval arming plan, in which they upgraded their entire fleet of warships with megaparticle weaponry. This is important. This is very This is very important for later. For the second part, this will become very ironic. Medical particle weaponry. So now that we know all of this, this now brings us up. This is all the lore that we need to know for now. This is so that now takes us to the Zaku One, the first mobile suit ever to be created. The mobile suit, this mobile suit is fun, as you can see. It's a very basic design. It's the first mobile suit to be invented. Mobile suits were invented by the Principality of Xeon as their secret weapon against the Earth Federation in preparation for their War of Independence. This thing is the mobile suit. No, the mobile suit is a combination of inventions, all put together. It's it's it includes the ultra compact Minovsky fusion generator to power all of its subsystems. It also includes a fluid pulse system, utilizing the power of the ultra compact fusion generator to create actuation within its joints. Sort of think of it like a pneumatic actuation system. Very efficient, very strong. This causes the mobile suit to very efficient and strong with its power usage. Not realistic, but giant robots have to be strong. But another important thing, it also includes the AMBAC system. The AMBAC system is a very important part and another important aspect of what makes mobile suits viable within the Mobile Suit Gundam universe. With Minovsky particles creating a polluted environment where targeting systems are are very ineffective, the mobile suit takes advantage of this. With the AMBAC system, it allows them to maneuver and become more agile without the use of propellant. You see, in space, you need a lot of propellant, and you need to maneuver a lot. Especially when you're a space fighter, you need to use propellant to make turns, make rolls, and be agile, right? The mobile suit the mobile suit's answer to that is the AMBAC system. The AMBAC system uses the limbs on the mobile suit to create to maneuver itself within space without propellant. It saves a shit ton on economy for propellant of mobile suits, as well as just makes them severely more agile than most space fighters that the Federation uses, like the Tin Cod. I would like the Tin Cod. I'm not showing a picture of the Tin Cod because it's basically just an F-15 in space. It's not that fun. This is what makes mobile suits viable within Mobile Suit Gundam, and this mobile suit pioneered that. The development history for the Zaku One is actually really fun. The the Principality of Xeon invented mobile suits as a weapon, but to disguise the development of mobile suits as a weapon, they first started development of mobile suits as mobile workers, giant giant humanoid exoskeleton mechs for industrial use, and then they used the development of those mobile workers and use that as like to hide the fact that they were gonna make these mobile workers into weapons. They turned their weapons into construction vehicles, hit them as construction vehicles, and then to develop weapons. It's really hilarious. It's really funny. It has a parallel to how tanks actually get their name because because the British back in World War I wanted to hide the development of land battleships, which was the actual name for tanks, and so they hid the name of the land battleships as tanks. So if enemy got any shipping manifests, they would think that, oh, they're only bringing like boiling tanks, like tanks, you know, big tanks of things. They were wrong, and that's how tanks got their informal name of tanks. It's a nice callback to how weapons and civilian industrial equipment have that funny relationship. This the Zaku 1 would then come into development into the Zaku 2. The Zaku 1 actually finished development around UC 71, UC 75, around early UC 70s. Before right before the beginning of the War of Independence that the Principality of Xi'an would go on, they would develop the MS-06, the Zaku 2, the development of everything they learned and they learned from training and combat simulations with the Zaku 1. The Zaku 1 was a formidable machine. It did everything that it needed. It actually showed that mobile suits could be viable in a combat scenario, and trained all the pilots of the Principality of Xi'an's military to be competent in combat. And it showed that mobile suits could be viable on combat in combat simulations. The Zaku 2 is all of the insights that they learn is that all of the insights that the Principality of Xi'an learned from the Zaku 1, and then they made the Zaku 2. The Zaku 2 is the main combat model for Xi'an during the 1 Year War, the Xi'an War of Independence. That will be for the second part. But this main combat model is important. See, when Xi'an created the Zaku 1, they thought they were going to go into war with the Zaku 1. Right before the War of Independence, right before Xi'an's Declaration of Independence, like declaration of war, they made they they looked back on the Zaku 1 and they saw several flaws within the design that showed that the Zaku 1 was not, well, it was simply not good enough for wartime usage. Maintenance was expensive. Ease of maintenance was expensive. It was hard, and it was basically an expensive machine to maintain. Is has a lower perform is a lower performance against other again in combat than could be achieved with modern improvements. And basically, all the pilots within the Principality of Xi'an were already finding the Zaku 1 limiting with its performance. So they made the Zaku 2. The Zaku 2 was redesigned from the ground up with considerations for frontline conditions, handling, and an increase in performance to for better handling for newbies and the more experienced pilots that the Principality of Xi'an now had because of training on the Zaku 1. The main considerations that were found within this design are in the power piping. As you can see, the main thing that the Zaku 2 shows it that is significantly different from the Zaku 1 is the appearance of power pipes. These power pipes, you might think, are inefficient, classic weak points, and could easily cripple the mobile suit. The main part, but you're mostly right in that aspect. But the power pipes were a compromise within the design. With the internal power pipes that the Zaku 1 had, it caused great issues of maintenance and repairability for the Zaku 1, and showed that if this was in a wartime scenario, the Zaku 1 would be a horrible machine to maintain in a wartime environment. So the Zaku 2 had external power piping. This is so that armor can be easily taken off, power piping can be easily repaired, and basically it just made life easier for mechanics that were working on the Zaku 2. Yes, this thing is durable, reliable, and a really good machine. It might become, it might, it might be dwarfed by several other machines in the future of the Mobile Suit Gundam series, but this thing still sticks around. Even though it was invented at 0078, it still sticks around 30 years, 40, 50 years after its service, and is still as a capable mobile suit. with its arsenal of, I think, a 130 millimeter machine gun. That is a caliber that tanks use as a machine gun. Uh, a 180 millimeter bazooka, and a heat hawk, which is a giant tomahawk that has a superheated blade. This thing is AK-7, AK-47 in mobile suits. A reliable, dirt cheap, good enough mobile suit. It's good. It's a good gun. So it brings us to the last part of part one. This session of this part, the beginning of the 1 Year War. Several things to look forward to, but we'll, uh, I'll first explain it. Beginning of the 1 Year War. One the Principality of Xi'an declares war on the Federation. A impromptu war of declaration due to several economic embargoes, tax reforms, and heavier taxation that the Earth Federation were applying onto the Principality of Xi'an during during the late UC 60s and early UC 70s. These economic sanctions, reforms, and heavier tax burden forced the hand of the Principality of Xi'an. They declared war in December 31, 0079. No, 0078. The first week of 0079 shows the first battle of the 1 Year War, dubbed the 1 Week Battle. Xi'an would start a blitzkrieg throughout all of Earth Federation controlled space, destroying military installations in Side 1, Side 2, Side 3, and all of the nearby sides within the Earth sphere. They would slowly whittle down all of space installations down to only one military installation that to only one military base that the Earth Federation would hold on to. Luna 2, asteroid base that was um, that was held at the other end of the Earth sphere, opposite to Side 3. The Principality of Xi'an would then gas a space colony, a colony inside 2. They would gas it with a poison gas called G30, killing the millions of people inside, and then drop the giant metal tube, um, almost as long as 23 kilometers, if I remember from the top of my head. 23 kilometers long and 4 kilometers tall. They would drop the rotating space colony on Earth in a plan to destroy the Earth Federation's military headquarters in South America in Jabro. They failed. The Earth colony would burn up in atmosphere and drop in the city of Sydney in Australia. This was only the beginning of the 1 Year War. The Earth Federation would be brought into negotiations with the Principality of Xi'an, but negotiations would fall through, and the Antarctic Treaty would be the only thing that comes out of those negotiations. The Antarctic Treaty outlined the laws of war for the next year. The use a basis of the Hague Convention and the Geneva Convention would be used as a basis for the Antarctic Treaty. The outlaw, um, the outlawing of weapons of mass destruction would also be implemented to avoid further death in the Earth sphere. Half of the population of the human race would be wiped out in this 1 week. That's the ending of part one. The beginning of the from the early UCs up to the beginning of the 1 Year War. That's a lot. Thanks. The next part will be sometime soon, maybe. My mouth is already sore from all this yapping, and that was 2 mobile suits and like 3 lore slides. God help my soul. Yay!